So, welcome to 22nd Century Management with Ken. On today's show, I'm really fortunate to have with me Ron Karr. And Ron has worked with leaders on 6 continents to eliminate risk, gain buy-in, and achieve better results faster with the velocity mindset. His presentation and advisory services have generated over $1 billion in incremental revenues for his clients. So that's a little intro. Ron, tell us a little more about your background.
Yes, $1 billion sounds like a lot, but it's over the span of about 32 years since I've been in business. Before I started this business, I was in a similar industry that you're in. I was in the computer industry, but I got my first sales experience in a school of hard knocks selling for Royal Business Machines, selling copiers. So I did that in the computer industry for about 10 years, and then I started my own consulting and advisory services and speaking business in 1988. And since then, like you said, I've been working with companies on 6 continents to help them grow their businesses.
That is an amazing start to your career. And it's interesting because when I started in my business, I actually started in the industry owning a business, but that meant I wore all the hats. And so I used to literally, I was a Toshiba dealer in El Paso. I would take a brochure because I started my dealership with $20,000.
Oh,
and
wow.
while it was 30 years ago, that still didn't buy much.
Right.
And so I would walk down the street with a picture of a copier, a brochure, and sell copiers off the brochure. And again, the school of hard knocks.
Well, in the Velocity Mindset book, we put a copier example there. We talk about a board meeting, and when I was hired by Royal Business Machines, they had their first plain bond copier. And they were seducing me with how sexy the copies were, 15 copies a minute. And I said, what about the cola? Don't worry about it. I'll be down in 6 months. What about this? 6 months. It didn't come for 2 years. And I started going in and knocking on doors, and the office manager goes, well, can you do what Xerox does? And they had the big machine on the 3rd floor. I go, no. And they said, well, come back when you can. And I realized, I was not getting the results that I wanted. So I had a meeting with myself to figure out what I could do differently. And I changed the conversation. And I started selling 3 at a time. But I remember those days fondly.
Yeah, and it was funny. I enjoyed sales. I had a shtick that I used when I was cold calling, because a lot of people hated cold calling. I loved in-person cold calling, because this was back also in the time when the rollerball pens came out, as early in their history, I guess. And so I had some ones made up with my company colors on them, with the advertising on them. And I'd walk into people's offices and I'd say, hey, I was in the neighborhood handing out bribes. Who gets bribes? And somebody would always take the pen, and then I got the conversation started. And so I always had fun with it. But I know a lot of people hate it, but to me, it was good times.
Well, you got to have fun in what you're doing and passion, because if you don't, it'll show.
Yeah, I agree 100%. So tell me, what does it mean to have the velocity mindset?
Well, Kenneth, let me ask you a question. When you hear the word velocity, what's the word that comes to your mind?
Speed.
Yeah, and that's what most people think. And that's only half the equation. If that's all you're thinking about, you're going to have burnout. Because what happens is people are usually task-driven to get the task done. At the end of the day, they didn't have time to eat lunch, and they're sitting there saying, man, am I exhausted, but what did I really achieve? The true definition of velocity, the physics definition, is speed with direction. And direction is your purpose. So the first thing we do in a velocity mindset, where you're trying to go, and do your actions support that? And you shouldn't be doing anything else if they do not support that. So that's what the velocity mindset is really all about.
Okay, yeah, and that makes a lot of sense, because too many times we can go really fast and be running in circles to some extent.
And actually, to go back on what we were talking about a minute, one of the things we talk about in the book is to have a board meeting with yourself. So we also talk about the art of the pause. And on a recent interview, someone said, so you have to pause to gain velocity? And I said, no, you just don't need to pause. You need to stop. And that's what I did in that copier story, because when I wasn't getting the results, I took myself to a board meeting at a diner in New Jersey. And I said, okay, what's the situation? You're not selling. Why? They're comparing you to Xerox. Can you beat it? No. So maybe change the conversation. And when I realized that I wasn't just selling a copier, I was selling a communication vehicle. On the next call, I went into this office manager and I said, hey, would you agree that a copier is nothing more than a communication vehicle? And they said, absolutely. I said, well, what's your biggest challenge there? And all of a sudden they started letting loose. They said, oh my God, Sally or Pete has to get up from the desk on the first floor, go to the staircase, to walk up to the third floor. After they chit chat and then they get up there, they have to wait behind all those mammoth jobs. By the time they get back to the desk, it's 2 hours. I said, how long is that? How many hours are you wasting a week? They said, try the equivalent of two full-time full-time positions. I said, I can give that back to you. And they said, how? I said, I'm not competing with Xerox. What I'm doing is giving you the opportunity to take this great copier, 15 copies a minute for your individual copies, put one on every floor, and you'll get back your productivity. And that's how I started selling 3 at a time. But that's the key. Sometimes to go fast, you have to go slow and stop, reevaluate your purpose, and make sure that your actions support your purpose.
Okay, that's very insightful. I like that idea too. One of the things that I see is that too many times businesses are engaged in a pattern of activity or a pattern of business that is counterproductive. And I'll use the copier industry as an example right now. We have a challenge that everybody's in this race to the bottom, and everybody wants to be the cheapest. And I keep telling people, I says, how do you make money when you're charging double o nothing per click? It's
Right.
kind of hard on the revenue stream, so people need to stop and think about what is it we're doing, and is this good for our business?
Right. And what's the value that I'm doing? Stop being on a downward spiral in price. Start thinking about the value. Like, for instance, I was on a phone call with a retainer client yesterday, and they're working on this big deal. And they're saying, yeah, we're in the final round for, final negotiations. And they kept saying, we don't have much room to give them price. I said, but you got something else to give. Forget price. You're the only one who's located right down the street from these people. What does it mean to them in terms of how they can access the job while you're making it, how they can do it better, and so forth? So the way to get ahead is not just on lower prices, as you and I both know.
Yeah, I agree 100% with that. Okay, so let me ask this question then. What are the 3 results one can expect from the velocity mindset?
Well, what we're telling people you're going to get is, number one, you're going to eliminate resistance, gain buy-in, and achieve better results. Those are the 3 results that we can guarantee. Now, why do you eliminate resistance, and how do you gain buy-in? So one of the things we talk about in the book is the concept of neuroscience. My last book, Lead, Sell, Get Out of the Way, was titled like that because we started telling people in the early 2000s, if you really want to sell today, you need to be a leader. After all, how many people, and I'll ask the audience, raise their hands, how many of you can't wait to go into your next big purchase and have a salesperson come up and bore you to death with features you're not interested in? Not one hand went up. But when I asked them who would welcome the assistance of a trusted advisor to help you make the right decision, all the hands went up. So that's why we're saying this is for salespeople and leaders of every kind. The bottom line is you cannot go forward in life with your business, with your job as a leader, if you do not know how to gain the buy-in of others. And so the one thing you want to do as a leader is you have to take responsibility for the environment that you create in the conversation, whether you're talking to an employee or a customer. So to give you an example, maybe we can role play this, Ken, for your audience and they can see it, okay?
Okay.
Let's suppose that you're working in a production facility, right? You're a production person and you're late on the job at 20 minutes. And I'm your supervisor and I'm really ticked because if you're late, I'm not doing my job, right? And all I see you is on your cell phone, fair enough? So now I go into you and say, hey, Ken, when you get off the damn cell phone, what are you going to say to me in response?
Well, this is important.
Right. And in the real situation what happened, he goes, why should I when everybody else is on a cell phone? In other words, you're going to go into CYA, cover your ass moment, right? Because that's where I'm pushing you, right? But that's not going to resolve anything. So the way you want to gain resistance, eliminate resistance, is I got to get your cortisol level down from the flight. Cortisol is the fight or flight hormone. I have to get it down from where you want to leave me or protect yourself to a point where you're really engaged. So I went to that supervisor and I said, what does this person like to do? And what motivates him? He wants to be a master welder. What do you need for that? You need quality and timeliness. How's his quality? Great. Timeliness, he's 20 minutes late. So go have a different conversation. Go in and say, look, you want to be a master welder, I get it. Your quality is perfect. The only thing is you're 20 minutes late for the timeliness part. What can we do to get you back on track? And all of a sudden, that guy started giving his own recommendations on how to speed up the project, because we created a safe environment for him to talk about what's important to him, which then led him to be engaged to want to help solve the problem. So leaders, whether you're a salesperson with a customer, whether you're employees, you have to really pay attention up front, knowing that if you don't do it right, you can create the opposite result, because you created resistance, if you will. And if you want to eliminate the resistance, you have to align what you want to do with what they want to achieve.
Now, I agree 100% with that. I see it so often in business that, well, I'm not going to call them leaders, but managers tend to create environments that absolutely stifle creativity, stifle momentum. They kill momentum, is a good, or kill velocity. Let's use your word for it, because it's such a negative place to work, and there's no sense of they're trying to help you. That's one of the things I teach service management, and that's one of the things that I tell them is when you set a goal for somebody, then you want to follow that up with, now let me know what I need to do to help you achieve your goal.
Right, but the challenge, Ken, is you're an enlightened leader. Most people who come up the ranks in management are promoted because of their performance, whether they're in service or sales. And what they don't do is they don't transform to their new job. For example, one of my clients had this national account manager. Now, as a national account person, he was great. He was number one. And, as a salesperson or a service engineer, your success is basically due to your efforts, right? You control it, you're going to make it happen. But now when you become a manager of other people, your success is no longer due to your efforts. Your success is due to the sum total of the efforts of the people below you. So what this guy did was he was addicted to that fire alarm. He was addicted to going out and saving the day. That's how he sold. So when his team had problems in Kansas City, he goes, I'll get on a plane, I'll come right out there, because it was a big deal. And when he went on the call, he made the cardinal sin of taking over the call and trying to save the day. Now look, once in a while, you got to save the day. But if that's all you're doing, what you're doing is you're training your salespeople to call you every time there's a tough call. And you're never going to make it. Your job is to let them do it, evaluate what the gaps are, coach them in between, so they're doing it 24/7 when you're not there, and then you're excelling as a manager. So have people gravitated to what their new job responsibilities and mandate really are.
Well, that is so interesting, because I use the analogy in my class about the difference between firefighting and fire prevention, because most people that were put in the role of being a manager are used to fighting fires.
Right.
And so that is the easy thing for them. That's what they're used to. Tech has a problem. Let me grab my toolkit. I'll go out and help them.
Yeah.
And then when they get there to help, well, here, just step back and watch. I'll show you. But the other thing that, and just along what you said, that's so interesting, is in the copier industry in particular, the typical path for training in service management is somebody walks up to their best tech and they say, congratulations, you're the service manager. And then they walk away.
Right.
Now, they would never, ever send a technician out without training him on the equipment. But they take a technician, put him in charge of a department, and he's good at fixing equipment. He knows nothing about fixing people, and leave him to sink or swim.
Exactly. And you use the phrase, and I know you didn't mean it exactly that way, but the biggest problem management do is they try to fix people, and no one wants to be fixed. The trick is creating an environment that gets the most out of people. And for each person, it's a little different based on what motivates them and based on what they're after.
Okay, and you're correct. The term fix people, but that was the analogy that was easy to draw.
No, I get that. And I know you didn't mean it that way, but for the audience, I wanted to make that distinction.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Okay, so then what are the self-improving or self-imposing limitations that will create drag on one's velocity? So what is it we do to ourselves?
Our stories. Life is a story, okay? So, and stories can have emotions usually attached to them. If they're good emotions, great. If they're bad emotions, mean they're not serving you well, then you got to change it. Now, the secret about a story is if you're the one who wrote that story, then you're the one who can change it. So in the book, I share, look, I was a son of a Holocaust survivor, and my father had If any of us went through what he went through as a child, we would be different people. And unfortunately, Holocaust survivors tended to create a very tough environment with a lot of ridicule, and it led to people like me growing up without a lot of confidence, okay? And as I was going through that in my early 20s and talking to some people and trying to get myself in the right stick, I met with a wisdom teacher, and we had 5 sessions and we were going through all this stuff. And finally, in the last session, she hit me over the head and she said, listen, what your father did is he did for his own reasons. How you interpret what he did and why is your story and your story alone. Is it serving you? And if it's not, then rewrite the story. And when you hear it that way, all the emotion goes away, and now you can think clearly about that. So what do I mean by stories? How many times has someone said something to you, Ken, that you interpreted as something and it turned out to be nowhere near how you interpret it? That's a story, right? But yet your actions after that may have been changed based on how you felt. So if that story is not serving you well, how can you rephrase it, if you will? So our stories are the number one thing that keeps us from going forward in life, and also our fears. Our fears are nothing more but being stories. Fears like, oh my God, this is not going to go well in this situation. They're not going to like me. This girl's not going to like me. This boy's not going to like me. Whatever. That's all a story. And when you can start grasping that, hey, this is just a story, get the emotion away, and I'm going to change it, you're going to be a better leader of your life and a better leader of others.
What you just said is really interesting, and I kind of relate to that because I had a tough childhood growing up for lots of different reasons. But I've kind of reframed my story in the sense that what I learned as a child was I learned how to work. I started working when I was about 10 years old, and I've worked nonstop. And I use that story, the piece of it in my mind and in conversation. When I was being interviewed at Sharp and being interviewed at Konica Minolta, in both cases, I would tell people that what I've learned to do in my life is work, and I can outwork any 2 guys you got.
Right. So that's a story that gave you juice and gave you good results. That's what I mean by a story that serves you well. But if it's a story that leads to no confidence in everything and saying, oh my God, I can't do this, they won't like me, whatever, that's a story that's not serving well, and you need to rewrite it. Now, also, the story that serves you well, if it's used too much, then it can become a weakness too and not serve you well. For example, you know how to work, and I'm not saying this is you, Kenneth, so don't take it that way. But there's some people that are workaholics, and then what they give up is being there for the family or whatever. So there's a balance in everything we do in life. But just remember, if a story is serving you well in one area of your life, that's great. Make sure it's serving you well in the other areas. If it's not, how do you want to tweak it?
Okay, so Ron, you just stepped on my toes. Because my wife would tell you that I'm the only person that she knows that can turn a vacation into a job, because I started doing travel videos. So now when we go on vacation, I have a photo shoot list of what we're going to shoot videos of. And she's like, why?
I did that too. I do when I do my videos, I get a bellhop in a hotel and say, hey, can you film me here in this location? And we'll just do that. So I get it.
Yeah. Okay, so let's go on to our next question. So the question here is, how does the law of focus work?
So I was asked to keynote the Centerville conference for the association that handles all the malls in the country. So this is like high-end network people that own the malls, people that own the chains that are in the malls. And I was the first speaker. It was in the Biltmore in Phoenix, in a tent, 500 people there at lunch. And the first question I asked them is, why is it that you're all late in your particular parts of the job? You're late, forcing everybody else to be late, but come hell or high water, that mall opens on the advertised date. Why? It's the law of focus. All right, you're all focusing on that date of July 22nd, and that's what's leading to that building or that mall being open. Focus is where you take your brain or an idea in your brain, and you think about it every conscious waking moment. Now, the one thing we say in the book is true leaders are the ones who are comfortable not having the answers up front. All right. If you're going into a new project or trying to get the company to go to a new level and you have all the answers up front, you're not shooting big enough. All right. When you're trying something new, how can you be expected to have the answer? So true leaders are comfortable not having the answers up front, but they know that if they have that big idea or that issue in their conscious mind, every waking moment, it'll lead to new questions, that will lead to new answers, that will lead to clarity of thought, that will lead to that mall opening on July 22nd. That's what the law of focus is all about. It's intentionality. It's making it happen.
Okay, and I like that. It's interesting. So I go back to a quote I read where somebody asked Thomas Edison how he felt about failing 10,000 times trying to create the light bulb. He said, "I didn't fail. I learned 10,000 things that didn't work."
Right.
And so we've got to be willing to take risk. And I think that's one of the things that stifles business a lot is they get in a mold that this is the way we've always done it. So that must be the only way there is to do it.
Now that's a big problem that affects a lot of CEOs. I mean, I find this every day when I'm coaching them because, they say, I want to take this business to the next level. I need a new production manager. So I'm going to hire someone with different skill sets. And then they come in and they try to do something new and they say, that's not the way we do it here. And then you have that stifling effect that you talked about earlier. Now, sometimes those new things will not work. All right. But you have to be open, are you open to new ideas yourself as the leader? Because if you're not, then you will be stifling somebody else, and that situation won't be working for them.
Yeah, I'll share a story along that line too. I took over a service department in a dealership in California. They brought me in. They put me on a really nice comp package to fix the service department, and everything I wanted to change was like, no, we can't change that.
And what happened to motivation?
Yeah. So I worked there 2 years and I looked for a job for 18 months.
Exactly.
So I found a position I wanted.
And you would have been doing a good job, but probably not the best job you could have done because your heart wasn't into it.
Well, again, everything was beyond my control. I would try to fix something and no, you can't do that. I literally had to go in and have this conversation with them one day because we had a customer that we were losing money on every click they made. And they had like 5 copies. I said, we have to raise rates, and here's what it has to be a minimum by. And the owner looked at me, we can't, we'll lose the business. And I looked at him, and this is what I told him exactly. I said, here's the choice. We either raise the contract or I'm cutting the power cords. You can choose. But that is the choice. And it just makes you nuts.
Yeah, I had a service manager when I was selling for Simplex Time Recorder Company. We were selling these electronic timestamps that at that time was what Wall Street used for the trades. So if anybody had a discrepancy, they can go back and see what the actual price was. And so my company sold shares in Lehman American Express, I don't know, 400 machines, right? And they kept breaking supposedly. So they kept replacing them. Then they replaced all the motors. And then when I was given the account, I went in to see the customer and he was ready to throw me out of his 104th floor window. You better fix this. So I go back to my service manager and I said, the first thing I said to him, I said, hey, I'm here to talk about this account. Forget it, I'm done. I said, what do you mean you're done? He goes, I've changed every motor. I've done my job. Those are not breaking. I'm done. And in that moment, I realized that I was really at a defining moment with this guy because I needed his help, but he was not ready to give it. So the only way I knew how to get through that was to empathize with him. And we talk about that in the book. If you don't have empathy with the people you're trying to influence, then they're not going to hear it the way you want them to. So I said, listen, I know you did a lot, and I really appreciate that. But let me ask you a question. At the end of the day, will you and I be considered having done our job if the customer still goes away because they feel we didn't do enough? Now, I know you can't afford any more man hours there. So what can I do to help you? He goes, well, we don't even know if it's the right machines, the same machines that are breaking down. I said, what if I create a log? Because at that time they didn't get serial numbers. What if I create a log and we can track the serial numbers and just have you guys, when they come, check it off? He goes, okay. And it turned out there was only like 20% of the machines that were really down. So I went back to the customer. I said, look, it's 20%. The real hit rate should be 10%. So my suggestion is you get 10% overage, extra machines. So the moment something goes down, even though we're here within 4 hours, you need it fixed immediately. You can trade it out immediately. We'll be here in 4 hours and you'll never be down again. And he bought it. And then the service manager was also happy. But that's what we have to do. We have to be empathetic to what both sides are looking at, and how do we come up with something that speaks to both sides.
Yeah, very nice. Okay, so let me ask one other question. You mentioned this earlier a little bit about the art of the pause. So, what is the art of the pause, and how does it affect our velocity?
So let's suppose, like a sales example, for example, when a sales exec was calling me up and saying, I'm going on a call, the first thing I said is, okay, pause. What's your goal of the call? Oh, I want to close the deal. All right, let me ask you a question. What's your sales cycle? 5 calls. What call is this in that sales cycle? The first call. And your goal is to close the deal. Yes. Well, you're going in with the wrong goal. Because if you're going to try and close a deal on the first call, and you know it's going to take 4 more calls, you're not listening to the customer. You're trying to close, and you're going to piss the person off. So what's the real goal of the call? The real goal of the call should be to qualify this person if they're a valid prospect, and what's the next path forward. That goal is going to lead you to doing different actions than if you wanted just to close the deal. So the art of the pause is simple. Make sure you ground yourself in the purpose, the end result that you want to achieve, and make sure that your actions are supporting that. And if they're not, substituting those with other actions that are going to help you get there.
Okay, and that's kind of interesting. I like what you said, because in my class, I go back to 7 Habits and start with the end in mind.
Right.
And so you've got to think about what it is you want to get accomplished, because if you're not focused on that, you're going to not you'll wind up either wandering around or trying to run too fast. A lot of different things could happen.
But that also means having clarity also what you want to get accomplished. For example, if I say, what's your goal for this year, and then sales or CEO, I want to make more money. I want to sell more. Well, that's not a goal. If you sold $1 more, you technically made it. Is that what you want? No. I want to sell $500,000 more. Well, it's going to take a different set of actions to get there than to sell $1 extra. Those actions to sell 500 may mean that you have to be better attuned to who your ideal client is, so you're not wasting time with people who don't value what you have to offer. So it's not just the destination, the purpose you want, but it's also the clarity. For example, Kenneth, if you go to Newark Airport, let's say, and you ask the pilot where we're going, he goes, wherever the winds take us, would you stay on the plane? And the answer is no. But what a pilot does is, if he's going to Miami from Newark, he's starting with the end in sight, specific, Miami, works his way back, figures out what the waypoints should be, what the winds are, and he finds the best way to get down there safely and the fastest way. That's what we're talking about.
And I love what you just said, because one of the questions that I ask in my service management classes is how many of them have a business plan for the next 5 years for their department.
Right.
And, I'm 60 students or so in, and how many have said they did?
Probably 3.
No, you're way too generous.
0.
Zero.
That'd be nice.
Okay, and here's the interesting thing: is it takes 3 years to train a new technician to be fully qualified. So if you don't know where your department is going to be in 3 years, how do you hire somebody and make a good hiring decision?
Oh, that's a whole new ball of wax. Yes, absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah, so I get pretty
Actually,
verbal about that.
When we help people, with the hiring process, and we have assessments that we use, we do what's called a benchmark, not of the person, but the job. So we ask the client, if this job can speak a year from today, after that person's on board, and that job was successful, what would it look like?
Yeah.
And then you work your way back and you say, okay, what are the key attributes that have to happen between 3 and 7? What are the key things that have to happen that if they're happening, it's going to lead to that end result? That's also part of taking a pause when you're hiring somebody. What we're looking for, what are the key things we know that they have to do on a daily basis so we can see it and measure it? Because that's going to lead to a different set of questions on the interview process to see if you're hiring the right people and if those are the people you want to take the battle with.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting, and then we'll talk about this in a minute here. I've kind of gone a little longer in a minute, but in the hiring process, so many people just have like generic process when they bring somebody in and they ask a few questions and, okay, well, let's see, you don't smell too bad, you're dressed okay, I'll hire you, and I am like, no, the hiring decision is one of those things that is hugely expensive. In fact, one of the things that they do in class, they have to figure out what it costs them to hire, and then what it costs, what the value of a trained technician is, because when they go through it, they wind up, that a technician, they're going to invest between $60,000 and $90,000 in a technician. So you got to make a good decision. You just don't want to throw $90,000 in the trash can.
But it's not only that, Kenneth, you're absolutely right. But then if the person's not happy because they're not being successful, they're being told that they're screwing up, all that good stuff, they go into this quadrant where they're still highly qualified but demotivated. And I call that the Cancer Quadrant. And what do people do when they're in that quadrant? They want to recruit others so they have company. So they start talking bad about the manager, about the company, about everything else, and they start bringing people in. And the worst thing for a manager or CEO is the number of people in that quadrant. Every morning they should pause and say, who's in this quadrant and what do I have to do to get them out of it? Whether it's right-sided up, if you will, so that now they're happy and they're productive, or if it's not going to work, move them down, because it can really affect your culture if people stay there too long and they start recruiting.
Yeah. No, I agree 100%. Ron, I have loved our conversation today. You're going to have to come back and we'll have to visit some more about some of the many topics that we have in common and things we like. For those that are watching today, do me a favor. Let me know what you thought of the show. As you see, if you're watching this on the replay on YouTube, do me a favor, hit the subscribe button. And we will see everybody next week. I have another show outlined. I'll be sharing that on LinkedIn here shortly. So I look forward to seeing everybody. Thanks for being here, Ron.
Thank you.